with that note, it's a time that we move on to our next panel discussion of the day, the VC perspective, AI, agents, and the healthcare ecosystem. As healthcare continues to evolve, the next decade will be shaped not just by technology, but by the ideas, business models, and innovation that investors believe have the potential to transform the ecosystem. And this panel brings together investors with deep experience across health tech, medtech, AI early stage investing, care delivery, life sciences, and consumer technology. Leading this conversation is our moderator. Once again, please put your hands together and join me in welcoming Sunanda Jayseelan. A big round of applause, everybody. And joining her on the panel, I request the event team to kindly get the chairs on the stage. Yes. Joining her on the panel, we have with us, ladies and gentlemen, Ashima Setia, principal at Sorin Investments, who focuses on backing category, defining health tech and medtech ventures across insurance, care delivery, and life sciences innovation. Would also like to welcome our next panelist, Mr. Anirudh Iyer, Vice President of Investment at Exceed Ventures, who works closely with early stage founders to build scalable, technology-driven businesses across AI, SaaS, fintech, and enterprise technology. And the next one we have Shivani Kulkarni, Vice President at Prime Venture Partners, an early stage technology investor with expertise across fintech marketplaces, consumer technology, and venture investing. And the last one for this segment, for this panel, we have the next panelist, that is Kamini Shivalkar, AVP at Gemba Capital, with extensive experience in early stage investing at a focus on the evolving health and wellness ecosystem. So ladies and gentlemen, let's give a huge round of applause as we welcome our moderator and our esteemed panelist on the stage. Can we have a huge round of applause as we welcome them?
Thank you so much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I know it's been a lot of conversations that we've had today around the health tech space, as well as the use of healthcare technology, the intersection. One of the discussions that I did this morning was really talking about and talking with players in the healthcare space. We were talking with, hospital chains and the use of technology. And this panel is taking off on that and talking about where are those opportunities, and would you, as the people who control the purse strings, would you be willing to put money into those innovations and technologies? And maybe I'll start there. We're talking about AI, we're talking about agentic AI, we're talking about how really industry is changing and evolving, and we're talking about how innovation is changing. And my question is, at some point, of course, there is going to be the question of who's going to really, where does the buck stop, right? And I want to start with a tough question maybe, and I want to apologize for that. Where does the buck stop if things don't go right between, the hospital chain, the AI, the tech providers? And would you be willing to put money into technologies and AI when it is risky? Is that something, and how do you sort of counter that risk? And maybe I'll start with my immediate left.
So this is a point that we deliberate in every investment, and there are two outer limits. One, it has to be clinically very, very safe as when a doctor is treating you. So if we see that safety on that end is compromised, we don't go forward. The second outer limit post that is legal implications. But the first thing is, if it is healthcare, it has to be effective for the immediate patient or the customer. If that criteria is not met, we do not go forward. And then comes that question of whether AI is enabling that fully. Is there a doctor in the loop? So today, nowhere in the world, I think barring California probably, where the deliberation is on, can I have an AI doctor? There's no AI doctor per se. And state of California is also deliberating. They've not launched any immediate outcomes on that, but ultimate responsibility rests with the doctor. So we operate with that constraint as well as opportunity. Although AI cannot be a doctor, AI can definitely make the doctor a lot more productive and effective, which was being discussed a couple of panels earlier. Can I treat doctor like a master chef? One of the members made a very good point. Can I treat doctor like a chef and make everything around them very, very productive?
Yeah, I echo this, and I think a lot was covered in the panel discussions also, right? So who bears who the patient thinks really is bearing the risk, right? When a clinical outcome sort of goes wrong. So I can break it down into two parts. One is, like, say, a doctor or clinician in this case is just using AI as a decision support tool, right? It's more of an augmentation tool for them, maybe administrative, maybe to make certain clinical decisions much more better, right? In that case, clinician or a doctor or a hospital brand per se bears that sort of a risk, right? Second is, we are talking about fully autonomous AI agents, right? I think as an investor personally, I wouldn't fund that category right now, right? Yeah.
So agentic AI for the moment you feel still is much more risky than.
Yes. Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, I think what she also meant was AI taking the decision. It can be agentic, like the workflows can be agentic. A lot of processes can be completely end to end given to an agent. But at the end of the day, the buck still stops at the doctor, the nurse, or the hospital, right? Like, for instance, we are investors in a company called Dozy, and they do remote patient monitoring. They are deployed in multiple hospitals, even in India and in US. And the fact that the regulator puts them through the grind, there are hospitals that do POCs, then deploy them in a very controlled fashion, and there is ton of data that is getting captured, and the effect, the outcomes being constantly monitored. I think this will be a journey, like even for Dozy or any other startup, right? It will start from you starting out with the doctors or the nurses taking the final decisions, to slowly moving to a system where AI can take some of those low risk sort of decisions, right? So I think that future will happen. But today, as investors, we really want the systems to be put through those stress tests. We are okay with the doctors making the decision, and that's, I think, where even we would be comfortable largely.
Anirudh?
Yeah, hi. You see, I think even for us, right, I think we would never invest in an autonomous, agentic, end-to-end workflow, right? So if you even think what's happening in the US, right, I mean, it would sound like Hippocratic AI. I think that's one of the best with adherence, right? I mean, even they work with a reinforcement learning model with a human loop feedback, which is very important. So I don't think it's got autonomous, like what Ashima pointed out very clearly. Except California, but otherwise, I think there's always a human in loop. And the way we look at AI is more from a productivity point of view. That's what we're looking at it right now as well. Yeah.
One of the things that AI definitely does and does well is the whole concept of personalization or micro-personalization to some extent. And I think that's something that your fund looks at. But this is open to all of you on the panel. Is that going to become a crucial piece of bringing in tech and therefore changing your patients and your customers, really personalization as well as the expectation and the experience they get away from it? Maybe if you could take that on first.
Yeah, on personalization bit, I'll cover, like I recently wrote about this, especially on the single specialty healthcare that is coming up right now, right? Personalization that can help to improve the patient outcome significantly. And I'm not talking just about AI, anything around tech, right? So I'll give an example right now about IVF. I'm sure this sector is right now still largely organized, only 50% is organized. But the gap is largely there where, let's say, a human doctor and embryologist in this case is sort of making a manual judgment about the entire process. There is a lot of trial and error that goes through the entire ovarian stimulation process, the dosage that needs to be going through, right? Now, how is the shift that some of the new age IVF clinics are adopting? How they are sort of bringing in AI and tech to solve some of this, right? Like completely, I would say, AI-led IVF treatment protocol, where right kind of a dosage you're able to monitor during the entire cycle for a particular patient that is going through, right? So those are some of the areas where I see personalization things sort of coming.
Yeah. And it was actually heartening to see some of the startups pitching some of these solutions, right? Because at least, for a women I can speak, every woman is a different person. The hormonal levels are different. They react differently to medication. And you cannot run to a gynac every time something happens to you, right? So something that can track how your body is reacting to a certain medication, what dosage works for you, how are you feeling emotionally, how are you feeling mentally. I think AI can I think it can deliver wonders in some of, and it can be very, very personalized.
Ashima, my question to you is, you have tech and AI, which is changing the way a lot of functions in the healthcare system is done, whether it's insurance, whether it's healthcare services, aftercare that is being provided. But which parts do you feel still needs a lot of technology? I guess what I'm trying to ask you is, could you call out some of those trends to say these are the areas that really need this kind of tech disruption, and here's where it's happening?
I think the future, as I imagine it, is an AI native hospital, and a lot of early models today focus on that. Superhealth is doing a great ground up approach to making the hospital truly AI native. They have scribes, for example, that listen. That's a listening scribe that kind of listens into the room, records it. Doctor has to do 10% of the work. I think over time, there can be a fully different way of thinking about certain things. For example, I see very little investment going into what if I do not need to spend time with doctor's assistant at all? Can this journey start at home for me? Can I, let's say, from the time I start booking my appointment, can the doctor's assistant take all the documents from me rather than me having to repeat? So the doctor becomes very, very effective. We were just talking about personalization, but I think we are just at the surface of personalization. There are certain things that are not even effective if not personalized. For example, microbiome. What if there is a way to identify from my microbiome that here are the things I am allergic to, inflammation causing substances? I think some of those are still trial and error. I go to a coach, they say, oh, you change your diet 5 times in a week, and then I'll tell you what you're allergic to. And in many patients, this surfaces really, really late into life, and it can lead to very serious problems. So some of those, I think, are less invested in, mainly because a lot of belief still rests around, oh, India cannot pay. But I think the top 100 million people in India are at a $12,000 of per capita income. They increasingly are focusing on personalized wellness when things don't go haywire. So I think there's a lot of investment yet to be made into that, and that can be the most promising thing of the future.
Shivani, there's so many complexities that go into the healthcare market in India, right? Ashima, for instance, was talking about data, and immediately I was thinking about there's so much privacy issues, right? You were talking about describe listening in, etc. So there's so many things that go in. In your mind, what is it that still makes this a very lucrative market? And despite the challenges, right, there are so many startups, etc. So where do you see perhaps the most innovation happening going forward?
Yeah, I think the complexities are the beauty of this particular sector, right? It's a feature, not a bug, to be honest. And if you just look at the health tech spend globally, right? Like be it the US market or the India market, it's enormous. Like US spends close to $4 trillion or some number like that, like insane number like that, right? So at the end of the day, all the health tech spends are going to trickle down to innovations and startups. So I think the complexity of it, be it in regulations or sales cycle or anywhere else, just ensures that the startups who are actually enduring it are building something long-term and defensible that can really scale. So to be honest, we are very bullish overall in this ecosystem. We have a couple of investments as well. But currently, what we are looking at are areas which are very specialized and specific, right? Like, for instance, the way Dozy came across was also because we were looking at remote patient monitoring and how there is a shortage of nursing staff globally. Like we see, and even in developed countries, we see this a lot more than we see in India, that for maybe 10 beds, there should be probably one nurse, but it's probably more than like 40, 50 beds that there is one nurse, and some of them are even semi-skilled. So how do you solve this gap? Now, this is a very specific problem and can be done in multiple ways. But we look at such problem statements and say, okay, what are the different angles that startups are approaching it from? And if they get it right, how big can the outcome be? So similarly, in oncology, we have looked at a few startups who are solving early detection, alternate methods of treatment that can be better. So very specific problem statements, but which can make like large outcomes and can make large impact. So that's, I think, where the focus area is for us.
Anirudh, the question to you, in a lot of the conversations that I had this morning when I asked about where perhaps technology right now is making the most change, it is as far as, say, marketing, booking appointments, etc. What excites you most, though, is my question about the use of technology. Is it about how AI and tech is fundamentally changing how healthcare is being delivered, or is it that operations are becoming more, streamlined?
No, I think in few domains, right? For example, radiology, I think that is, how healthcare is delivered, right? Like what you said right now, which is very effective. But I'm actually also I'm more excited about how, like if you think about RCM in India, has been an age-old industry, right? And even within RCM, there are different niches. If you think about dental as a niche, if you think about, horizontal as well. But so I like how, Indian companies can actually, like the way I'm looking at this right now is, if you can really start building on eligibility verification, a few of these use cases, but see, for us, generally in healthcare, at least in software, we normally bet India-US corridor. That's how we really look at it. So I think for us, it's also about a founder able to figure out, a differentiated GTM, figuring out, what wedge really works. Can he expand with that niche? Does he have network in that niche? That's how you look at it. But for me, I think I'm more excited about scribing. I'm excited about, how you can go about automate calling as well. But see, even automate calling has its own nuance because people feel it's, the margins are really low right now because a lot of quality you need QAs for that to get it going and to stabilize it over a period of time. But even that is possible. We're seeing that coming out really well in few domains out there within healthcare. Yeah.
Kamini, if I can come to you, and then I'll take closing comments from all of you. We're seeing a lot of innovation that's happening, right? Technology, AI, etc. But not a lot of them perhaps are making it for the long term. It's not a long-term story. From an investor's perspective, what makes a startup or tech sticky for you?
I think when it comes to healthcare, right, it has to be measured in terms of outcome per se, because healthcare is largely outcome-driven business, right? Specific measurable outcomes if you are able to build over a period of time. Like say, if I look at GLP right now, I think it's still very early days in India. It has picked up a lot in US, right? But there's a natural progression that will happen over a period of time where a patient needs to be monitored, right? So a specific measurable outcome. And I sort of use a framework in this case, let's say patients or anybody, like let's say customers perceived value versus let's say a delivered value, right? And how closely you're able to bridge a gap between these two, right? Like let's say when a patient walks into a clinic, like say when they're onboarding a particular app, the perceived value may be very, very high. Oh, I might, get a great outcome. But like say after using it for a couple of months or a couple of weeks, kind of the interest sort of can die down, right? Because it's not able to engage with you, it's not able to deliver the promised outcome, right? And that's where the retention starts dropping. Yeah.
All right, let me take closing comments, and if I can request that you keep your answers to about maybe 30 seconds if possible. And maybe I'll start with you this time, Anirudh. If you want to leave the audience here today, including and especially targeted at the entrepreneurs, what advice do you want to leave them with when it comes from the investing perspective? Right. What advice do you want to leave them with?
See, I think I saw a few demos here, right? I think one thing, I saw a bunch of features going out there and even the market sizing. But I think more than that, I feel it's very important to, one is, I think, figure out one entry point, work around that. And, also when you speak about really high R&D kind of pipelines, be very clear and concise about what exactly where you are right now. It can't just be ideation without a lot of proof points, right? If it's going to be ideation, then it has to be a lot of surveys that's gone into it as well. So, it's very important to cite, also those pointers very clearly. So I think it'd be better to focus this one, but beyond that also, at least because we've invested in Panoram, it's Exosome platform. It's a deep tech company out there, right? That they're also working on their first formulation, which is a corneal. It's called Coragal Gel. It's a formulation for corneal blindness. So I've seen like the 10-year journey the founders had to building something that's really high R&D. So I think even giving timelines of 1 year is not very clear. If that's going to be off the market, that's a very different thing out there. But I think the pitch could be, could start with, how they arrived at the problem statement and where they are in the journey right now very clearly. Yeah. In 3 minutes, if you get that. Yeah.
Maybe 2 or 3 problem statements that you want to leave the audience with, very clear statements that you can give them to say, here's what you should be looking at.
I mean, to be honest, it doesn't work that way because it's much better the problem statement coming from them. But I would just say 2-3 areas that maybe us as VCs or me, especially my firm, is looking at. Right? It is one, I think, oncology, and second, chronic care management is the second area, and third is, this is actually not India, but US related, but on the insurance processing and claims side, that is one area that we are actively looking at, but that's more US market, right? But oncology and chronic care management are both India specific problem statements that we are looking at. But just I would like to add maybe 10 seconds and add one thing to Anirudh's point that might help some companies here. Please don't underestimate the value of good storytelling. Like whenever you're pitching, please ensure that you're talking about the problem statement, the stories. I mean, I know 3 minutes is a very little time for you to communicate, but just whatever time you get with anybody, right? It doesn't have to be a VC, it doesn't have to be a doctor. It can be your relative who you are telling your story to, but just make sure that it's consistent and you're focusing on that. Sorry, I just digressed, but I thought it was important.
No, not at all. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, Kamini.
Yeah, so I'm pretty much excited about healthcare, right? I think healthcare is sort of the next defining decade in India right now. Obviously, there are structural shifts that we are seeing, especially on the consumer wellness side. So on the preventative side, on the wellness side, obviously the obvious categories are around food, nutrition, training, right? Those are some of the exciting areas. Secondly, if I'm going more downstream, right? Like say if I look at a whole healthcare piece, the single specialty, a lot of categories that are, so I broke it down into 2 parts. There are the categories that hospitals never built. I think some of the pitches today were more around women's health, right? These were going beyond gynecology, beyond fertility, right? About many perimenopause, a lot of menopause, those sort of areas where a hospital largely it's not touched. Though that is one. And second is categories that maybe are already in the single specialty spectrum. Maybe we need to do a better job, more than operational excellence per se, right? Like your usual IVF, oncology, how can we do better with tech, with precision medicine? Yeah.
I'll let you literally have the last word, Ashima. What would you like to leave them with?
So what I have noticed, and I've been meeting very good health tech startups last 3 years. I was part of a startup, healthcare startup, running their insurance vertical back at MediBuddy. What I've seen is there are certain reasons things get introduced in the US, and the same product may work in India, but for a very different reason. So a lot of times there are attempts in India to build clinical decisioning support systems. In the US, they need to be adopted by hospitals because that will get them their insurance claims cleared on time. In India, that is not the pressure. Yes, that is a consideration, but a bigger pressure is, can I get my revenue? So one of the companies, My Healthcare, they beautifully sold EHR in India. They went to tier 2 hospitals, hospital chains, told them that by following this clinical decision support system, you will actually gain revenue. That's the side that the founder helped hospitals see. And it was adopted so well within the Indian system. So I think we have myriad of inspiring examples with us wherein, yes, there's a need for the product, but maybe the entrepreneur just needs to step back and see what exactly is the problem that it will solve within this particular free market. India is the most free market when it comes to healthcare. There's it's a case study in itself. So can I make the hospital management like this product commercially so that they adopt me? I think that triangulation and thinking goes long way if done in early days of launching a startup.
Including the AI doctor that you were mentioning. I think we're a long way off from that.
So yes, AI doctor is actually a part of that as well. So maybe an AI doctor does not work for giving me a consultation, but can they help, let's say, a pharma online delivery company do the vetting call, for example? Can it smartly help the doctor sitting there? Open Evidence did the AI doctor really well. They set out to, they started to build an AI doctor, but then they realized, I am great at accumulating knowledge, the most recent knowledge from the research publications. So doctors started paying for it. It's a big thing to get doctors to put in their own credit card towards it. But I think over time as I build, I need to quickly get those signals from the market.
All right, thank you very much. We're out of time on this panel, but it's definitely a conversation starter. Thank you so much to all of you. A round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, and I request Sunanda to kindly hand over the token of gratitude for all our esteemed panelists. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a huge round of applause for all of them. Thank you so much, everybody, together for one photo, please. All of you, you can just drop your gifts back in the chairs and... All right, let's give it up for all of them once again, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much once again for the insightful conversation.